History whispers tales of emperors, kings and tyrants. We read about their conquests, their grand palaces, and the empires they forged. But beneath the gilded crowns and the pronouncements of power lie shadows so deep, so utterly depraved, they challenge the very definition of humanity. Tonight, we at the Hidden Ledger delve into one such shadow, a chapter of history so dark, so uniquely sadistic, it has echoed through the centuries as a testament to absolute power gone absolutely mad. This isn't just another story of a cruel ruler. This is a chilling account that forces us to confront the most uncomfortable truths about human nature when unchecked power meets unchecked cruelty. Our mission at the Hidden Ledger is to expose the raw, unfiltered reality of history, no matter how disturbing. We peel back the layers of sanitized narratives to reveal the horrifying acts that truly transpired, pushing the boundaries of what you thought possible in the annals of human depravity. We don't shy away from the uncomfortable, we embrace it, because only by confronting these dark truths can we truly understand the past and, perhaps, guard against its recurrence. Tonight, we're talking about an emperor, a ruler of vast lands and countless souls, who committed an act so monstrous, so uniquely sadistic, it has been etched into the historical record as a chilling warning. We speak of the emperor who forced eunuchs to eat their own genitals. This isn't a myth, a legend, or a hyperbolic tale. This is a documented historical atrocity, a stark reminder of what happens when the human capacity for cruelty is given free rein and dignity is utterly annihilated. The very notion of such an act is designed to horrify a modern audience, and rightly so. It assaults every sense of morality, every concept of human rights we hold dear today. It's a violation of the body, the mind, and the spirit on a scale that few other historical events can match. This episode will not be easy to watch, but it is a story that demands to be told. It is a testament to the depths of tyranny and the unimaginable suffering that can be inflicted when a single individual holds absolute dominion over the lives of others. Prepare yourselves. This is the raw, unfiltered truth. This is the Hidden Ledger. To understand the full horror of the atrocity we are about to discuss, we must first understand the victims. The emperor's command, as we will soon reveal, targeted a specific, often paradoxical class of individuals within imperial courts, the eunuchs. Their lives were a complex tapestry of immense power, profound trust, and unimaginable vulnerability. The concept of the eunuch is as ancient as civilization itself, appearing in various forms across Mesopotamia, Persia, China, the Byzantine Empire, and later in the Ottoman Empire. At its most fundamental, a eunuch is a male who has been castrated, typically before puberty, though adult castration also occurred. This brutal surgical procedure, often performed under primitive and agonizing conditions, served a singular, chilling purpose: to ensure loyalty and prevent the rise of rival dynasties. By removing their reproductive capacity, eunuchs were perceived as safe around royal women, concubines, empresses, and princesses, as they could not father children who might challenge the legitimate succession. They were, in essence, a living guarantee against usurpation through lineage. Paradoxically, despite their physical mutilation and the inherent violation of their bodies, eunuchs often ascended to positions of immense trust and intimacy with emperors and empresses. They became guardians of the imperial harem, advisors in matters of state, and administrators overseeing vast bureaucracies. Their unique status allowed them access to the most private chambers of the palace, areas forbidden to other men. This proximity to power meant that a eunuch, though technically a servant, could wield influence that far surpassed that of many nobles. History is replete with examples of eunuchs who rose to incredible prominence. In China, powerful eunuch factions often dominated imperial courts for centuries, effectively becoming de facto rulers, military commanders, and chief ministers. Figures like Narses in the Byzantine Empire, a eunuch general, commanded armies and shaped the course of empires. Their lack of a traditional family line, while making them outsiders, also made them seemingly ideal servants. With no sons to establish a rival dynasty, their loyalty was theoretically undivided, focused solely on the emperor. However, this power came at a terrible cost. and it was always coupled with profound vulnerability and dependence. A eunuch's entire existence was predicated on the favor of the ruler. They were fundamentally property of the emperor, their bodies and lives disposable at the ruler's whim. Their physical alteration, a permanent mark of their separation from societal norms, meant they often lacked the traditional familial and clan networks that provided protection and support to other members of the court. This made them both indispensable and utterly exposed. Their positions, while offering influence, also provided opportunities for immense wealth and, often, corruption. As they controlled access to the emperor and managed vast resources, many eunuchs amassed fortunes. This wealth, however, made them targets of envy and accusation from rival factions within the court, further highlighting their precarious position. Beyond the physical trauma, the act of castration carried a heavy psychological and social toll. It stripped individuals of a fundamental aspect of their identity in many societies, leaving them in a liminal state, neither fully male nor fully female, often viewed as other. The loss of the ability to procreate was not merely a physical deprivation. In cultures where lineage and ancestry were paramount, it meant the end of one's direct line, a profound existential void. This unique social standing, while sometimes granting specific privileges, also ensured their perpetual isolation and dependence. Ultimately, the eunuch served as a potent symbol within the imperial system. They were a living embodiment of imperial control, a testament to the emperor's absolute power over even the most intimate aspects of the human body. They were also a symbol of sacrifice, men whose very essence was given up for the service of the state or the ruler. This context is crucial for understanding the atrocity that transpired. Despite their potential for power, eunuchs were, at their core, instruments of the imperial will. Their bodies were not their own, their lives were not their own. This inherent disposability, this ultimate vulnerability, would be horribly exploited by an emperor whose madness knew no bounds. It is this fundamental truth, that even those closest to the throne could be reduced to mere objects of terror and degradation, that sets the stage for the unspeakable act we are about to uncover. We've explored the paradoxical world of the eunuchs, men who held immense power yet existed in a state of profound vulnerability, their very bodies a testament to imperial control. Now, we turn our gaze to the architect of their ultimate horror, the figure whose name is synonymous with unimaginable cruelty and the act that defines this episode. The emperor we speak of is Zhu Wen, who would later establish the later Liang dynasty and crown himself Emperor Taizu of later Liang. His reign, spanning the tumultuous period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms in China, early 10th century CE, was a dark chapter marked by relentless warfare, political intrigue, and a level of personal depravity that shocked even his contemporaries. Born into a peasant family, Zhu Wen's rise was not one of noble lineage or scholarly achievement, but of brutal ambition and a cunning, ruthless grasp for power. He began his career as a rebel leader in the Huangchao uprising, a massive peasant rebellion that ravaged the Tang dynasty. As the rebellion faltered, Zhu Wen, ever the pragmatist and opportunist, defected to the Tang court, offering his military prowess to suppress the very rebels he once led. This act of calculated betrayal earned him favor, titles, and most importantly, the military resources he would eventually turn against his former masters, and indeed, against anyone who stood in his way. His ascent was paved with blood, treachery, and an unshakable will to dominate. Zhu Wen's reign as Emperor Taizu of later Liang was characterized by an almost ceaseless state of political instability and brutal authoritarianism. The empire he carved out was constantly embroiled in conflicts with rival warlords and successor states, a reflection of the chaotic era he helped usher in. His governance style was not one of statesmanship or benevolent rule, but of raw, unbridled tyranny. He ruled through fear, suspicion, and an absolute disregard for human life. Decisions were often made on a whim, fueled by paranoia or sadistic impulse, rather than strategic foresight. His court was a viper's nest of terror. Trust was a luxury no one could afford, least of all those closest to him. He cultivated an atmosphere where loyalty was demanded, but never truly believed, and disloyalty, real or imagined, was met with swift and horrifying retribution. His reputation among his contemporaries was one of a bloodthirsty tyrant, a man whose cruelty knew no bounds. Historical records from the period, often written by those who suffered under his rule or witnessed his atrocities, paint a consistent picture of a monarch consumed by his own power and dark desires. Long before the specific atrocity we are detailing, Zhu Wen's reign was punctuated by numerous anecdotes of extreme cruelty and psychological instability. These weren't isolated incidents, but rather a consistent pattern of behavior that revealed a deeply disturbed and dangerous mind. One of his most infamous practices was the dry ditch method of execution. Instead of simply beheading or hanging, he would force his victims, often captured enemies or perceived traitors, into deep ditches where they would be slowly buried alive. The screams from these pits would serve as a chilling warning to anyone contemplating defiance. This wasn't merely about killing, it was about prolonged suffering and psychological torment, a clear precursor to the depths of sadism he would later reach. His paranoia was legendary and all-encompassing. He constantly suspected plots, even from his most loyal generals and officials. If a general achieved a significant victory, Zhu Wen would often suspect them of building a power base to challenge him, leading to their swift and often brutal execution. He once ordered the execution of a group of generals simply because they had been drinking and laughing loudly, interpreting their merriment as a sign of disrespect or conspiracy. This unpredictability and extreme suspicion meant that no one was truly safe, and life at his court was a constant tightrope walk between obedience and annihilation. Furthermore, Zhu Wen was known for his bizarre and violent sexual appetites. Historical accounts describe him forcing his sons' wives to sleep with him, a deeply taboo act that showcased his utter contempt for societal norms and familial bonds. These acts were not just about lust, they were about asserting absolute dominance, humiliating those around him, and demonstrating that no one, not even his own family, was beyond his control. This moral depravity and willingness to violate the most sacred boundaries were clear indicators of a mind unhinged and capable of any atrocity. Zhu Wen's relationship with the eunuchs in his service was a microcosm of his general approach to power. They were tools to be used, abused, and discarded at his whim. While some eunuchs, particularly those who served him effectively, might have enjoyed temporary favor, their existence was always precarious. He did not view them as individuals with rights or dignity, but as extensions of his imperial authority, their bodies and lives entirely subject to his control. They were privy to his most private moments, his darkest thoughts, and his most brutal commands, making them both indispensable witnesses and potential liabilities. This intimate yet utterly subservient position made them prime targets for his escalating paranoia and sadism. By now, it should be clear that Zhu Wen was not merely a harsh ruler, but a deeply disturbed individual whose reign was a tapestry of terror. His early acts of cruelty, his pervasive paranoia, and his utter disregard for human dignity were not anomalies, but integral parts of his character. The stage was set for an act that would transcend even his previous horrors, an atrocity so profoundly disturbing that it would forever cement his place in the darkest annals of history. The eunuchs, already existing in a state of profound vulnerability, would become the unfortunate subjects of his ultimate, unspeakable display of power and depravity. We've laid bare the tyrannical nature of Zhu Wen, Emperor Taizu of later Liang, a man whose reign was a chilling symphony of paranoia, brutality, and unchecked power. His history of cruelty, from the dry ditch executions to his violation of familial sanctity, paints a portrait of a mind already teetering on the precipice of extreme depravity. But even for a ruler of such documented sadism, the act of forcing eunuchs to consume their own severed genitals stands as an unprecedented horror. What were the immediate triggers, the specific circumstances, or the final descent into madness that led to this unspeakable command? History, even when recounting the most monstrous acts, rarely provides a single simple answer. Instead, it offers a confluence of factors that converge to create the conditions for unthinkable cruelty. For Zhu Wen, the atrocity against the eunuchs appears to have been a grotesque culmination of his escalating paranoia, his volatile temperament, and a deep-seated need to assert absolute, terrifying dominance. While no single, definitive trigger incident is universally cited for this specific act, historical accounts suggest a pervasive atmosphere of suspicion and instability within his court. Zhu Wen was constantly plagued by fears of assassination and betrayal. He routinely suspected his own generals, officials, and even his adopted sons of plotting against him. This relentless paranoia meant that anyone in his inner circle, especially those with intimate access like the eunuchs, lived under a perpetual death sentence. A casual glance, a whispered conversation, or even a perceived lack of enthusiasm could be interpreted as a sign of disloyalty, igniting his explosive rage. The political instability of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period also played a crucial role. Zhu Wen's empire was not a stable, unified entity, but a constantly contested territory, surrounded by rival warlords and nascent dynasties. This external pressure undoubtedly fueled his internal anxieties and intensified his desire to maintain absolute control through terror. He needed to send an unmistakable message to his court and to his enemies. Defiance meant not just death, but an unimaginable level of suffering and degradation. This act was, in part, a brutal consolidation of power, a horrifying demonstration that his will was absolute and that no one, regardless of their position or perceived loyalty, was beyond his reach. Beyond external pressures, the emperor's psychological deterioration seems to have been a significant factor. Historical chronicles hint at a mind increasingly unhinged, spiraling into deeper levels of sadism and megalomania. His earlier acts of cruelty, while horrific, might have served as a baseline, and with each atrocity, his threshold for violence likely increased, pushing him to seek new, more extreme ways to assert his power and satisfy his twisted urges. The isolation of absolute power, coupled with his inherent instability, could have created a distorted reality where such acts seemed not only permissible but necessary. The eunuchs, by their very nature, were in an incredibly precarious position. They were intimate servants, privy to the emperor's secrets, and often involved in the administration of the inner palace. This proximity, while granting them influence, also made them ideal targets for a paranoid ruler. If Zhu Wen suspected a plot, even a phantom one, the eunuchs, with their unique access and their perceived lack of external family ties, could easily become convenient scapegoats. Their physical emasculation, which was supposed to guarantee loyalty, could, in a perverse twist, become the very symbol of their vulnerability and the target of the emperor's ultimate emasculating punishment. In Zhu Wen's twisted mind, this act might have had a perverse logic. It wasn't just about killing, it was about ultimate degradation and symbolic annihilation. By forcing the eunuchs to consume their own severed genitals, he was not only inflicting unimaginable physical and psychological torture, but also symbolically destroying their very essence, their identity, and their last vestiges of humanity. It was a complete and utter stripping away of dignity, a public and visceral assertion that their bodies, their lives, and their very being belonged entirely to him, to be defiled and consumed at his command. This connects to the reframed medical prescription of intimate satisfaction concept, a horrifying prescription of suffering and self-destruction dictated by the emperor's deranged will. It was a cure for perceived disloyalty, administered with the most brutal and perverse medicine imaginable. The court environment further enabled this depravity. Surrounded by fearful officials and sycophantic courtiers, Zhu Wen faced no real challenge to his authority. The pervasive fear meant that no one dared to speak against him, to question his commands, or to intervene. This silence, born of terror, created a vacuum where the emperor's darkest impulses could manifest without restraint, culminating in an act that would forever stain the annals of human history. We have meticulously reconstructed the horrifying act committed by Zhu Wen, the forced mutilation and consumption of his eunuch's genitals. But to simply recount the event, no matter how chilling, is to miss a deeper, more disturbing truth. We must now delve into the mind of the man who orchestrated such an atrocity. What twisted motivations drove Zhu Wen to commit an act that transcends mere cruelty and plunges into the abyss of pure depravity? The precise moment the command was given is shrouded in the terror of the court, but historical accounts paint a vivid picture of the emperor's volatile nature. Zhu Wen, known for his sudden, explosive rages, could have issued the order on a whim, fueled by a perceived slight, a paranoid delusion, or simply a desire to exert his absolute, terrifying will. Imagine the scene, the opulent yet suffocating atmosphere of the imperial palace, perhaps the throne room or a private chamber where the air was thick with fear. The eunuchs, always present, always attentive, would have been caught in the sudden, horrifying shift in the emperor's demeanor. The command, when it came, would have been delivered with the cold, unfeeling authority of a man who saw no limits to his power. It wasn't a request, it was an absolute decree. The eunuchs, who had served him, perhaps even advised him, were now reduced to mere objects of his sadistic fantasy. Their initial reaction would have been a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a profound, paralyzing terror. Pleas for mercy would have been futile, met only by the emperor's unyielding gaze or a further surge of his wrath. Immediately, they would have been seized by guards or other terrified servants, their fate sealed by a single monstrous word from their emperor. What followed was an act of profound violation, a physical and psychological torment designed to utterly break the human spirit. The eunuchs were subjected to a second horrific castration, this time not for service, but for ultimate degradation. The process would have been brutal, carried out by executioners or soldiers accustomed to violence, but perhaps even they would have recoiled from the sheer depravity of the order. The air would have been filled with the screams of the victims, the sounds of their agonizing pain echoing through the imperial chambers, a horrifying symphony orchestrated by the emperor's will. This was not a private act of punishment. In a perverse echo of the ceremonial verification we previously discussed, this atrocity was likely carried out, or at least witnessed, by a select group of terrified courtiers. The emperor, in his twisted desire for absolute dominance, would have wanted his court to bear witness to his power, to understand the unimaginable consequences of displeasing him. Imagine the horror on the faces of those forced to watch, their own lives hanging by a thread, their silence born of a terror so profound it paralyzed them. This forced witnessing was an additional layer of psychological torture, extending the emperor's cruelty beyond the immediate victims to all who served him. After the agonizing mutilation, the severed body parts were not simply discarded. This detail, perhaps the most disturbing of all, elevates the act from mere execution to a ritual of ultimate defilement. The parts were collected, likely presented to the emperor, perhaps on a platter or in some other grotesque display, confirming the completion of his horrifying command. This step transformed the act into a perverse ceremony, a macabre offering to the emperor's insatiable sadism. And then came the unthinkable command, a decree that transcended all known boundaries of human cruelty. Zhu Wen ordered the eunuchs to consume their own severed genitals. This was not about death. It was about the complete annihilation of dignity, the ultimate act of psychological torture. The physical pain of the mutilation, unimaginable as it was, paled in comparison to the revulsion and profound violation of being forced to ingest one's own body parts. The act of forced consumption would have been a struggle, a desperate battle between the victim's inherent revulsion and the emperor's absolute will. Were they spoon-fed? Were they forced at knife point? The details are sparse in their horror, but the outcome was clear. The eunuchs, already physically broken, were now forced to commit an act that would forever scar their minds and souls, reducing them to a state of utter dehumanization. The emperor, in all likelihood, watched this spectacle, perhaps with a detached curiosity, a chilling satisfaction, or the vacant stare of a madman. His reaction, or lack thereof, would have only amplified the terror in the room. This horrifying event is documented in historical sources from the period, most notably in the Zizhitongjian, a monumental chronological general history of China compiled by Sima Guang in the 11th century. While such accounts are often terse in their descriptions of extreme violence, the very mention of such an act, even in its brevity, speaks volumes about its impact and the emperor's notorious cruelty. Historians rely on these primary sources, often written by court officials or scholars who lived through or shortly after these events, to reconstruct the chilling reality of Zhu Wen's reign. While the specific motivations or the exact number of victims might be subject to historical debate, the core act itself is tragically confirmed, cementing its place as one of the most uniquely depraved acts of imperial power. This act, in its horrifying efficiency, can be seen as a twisted manifestation of the reframed, deadly contraception method's concept. Here, the method is not for birth control, but for the ultimate control and elimination of perceived threats, executed with a ruthlessness that defies comprehension. It was a deadly method of asserting dominance, a perverse cure for disloyalty, administered with a brutality that forever marked Zhu Wen as one of history's most monstrous tyrants. Understanding the psychology of a tyrant like Zhu Wen is a complex, often unsettling endeavor. His actions were likely born from a confluence of factors, each feeding into a personality already predisposed to violence and control. Firstly, the undeniable presence of sadism looms large. Was Zhu Wen a true sadist, a man who derived genuine pleasure from the suffering of others? His history suggests so. From the prolonged agony of the dry ditch executions to his perverse sexual acts, there is a consistent pattern of inflicting not just death, but torment. The act against the eunuchs, with its layers of physical pain, psychological humiliation, and forced self-degradation, points directly to a desire for suffering as an end in itself. It was not merely about eliminating a threat, it was about crushing the spirit, about witnessing the ultimate breakdown of a human being under his absolute power. This aligns with the reframed, medical prescription of intimate satisfaction concept, but in a horrifying inversion, a prescription for the emperor's own twisted gratification, administered through the agony of others. Secondly, the act was an unparalleled display of absolute power. Zhu Wen's reign was one of constant struggle to maintain control in a fractured empire. He faced relentless challenges from rival warlords and lived in perpetual fear of betrayal. This atrocity served as a terrifying, undeniable demonstration that his will was absolute, that he held ultimate dominion over life, death, and even the very bodies of those closest to him. No one, not even his most trusted inner circle, was safe from his wrath. This act was a brutal, visceral warning to any potential conspirators or challengers, a message screamed in blood and agony: defy me, and your fate will be worse than death. This connects directly to the reframed fitness trials, where individuals were subjected to public tests of their very being. Here, the eunuchs underwent a grotesque trial of their subservience, a public degradation designed to prove the emperor's terrifying omnipotence. Thirdly, paranoia and revenge undoubtedly played a significant role. Zhu Wen was notoriously suspicious. He saw plots everywhere, even among his most loyal subjects. While specific historical accounts may not pinpoint a single act of betrayal by the eunuchs that directly triggered this atrocity, it is highly probable that a perceived slight, a whispered rumor, or even a moment of his own heightened anxiety could have fueled his rage. In his mind, any perceived disloyalty, no matter how minor, warranted the most extreme and humiliating retribution. He was a man who believed in preemptive, terrifying punishment to quell even the faintest whisper of dissent. Fourthly, we must consider the possibility of psychological deterioration or outright madness. The extreme nature of his cruelty, coupled with his erratic behavior and bizarre sexual acts, suggests a mind that was profoundly disturbed. Absolute power, unchecked by any moral compass or external accountability, can act as a corrosive force, eroding sanity and fostering megalomania. The isolation of the imperial throne, combined with the constant pressure of warfare and internal intrigue, could have pushed an already unstable personality into a full-blown psychosis. Historical accounts, though not clinical diagnoses, often describe his unpredictable mood swings and sudden violent outbursts, painting a picture of a ruler increasingly detached from reality. Finally, a crucial element in understanding such an atrocity is the process of dehumanization. For Zhu Wen to commit such an act, he had to strip his victims of their humanity in his own mind. The eunuchs, already physically altered and often seen as other in society, were easy targets for this psychological process. By reducing them to mere objects, to disposable tools, he could justify inflicting unimaginable suffering without any sense of empathy or remorse. This act of forced consumption was the ultimate expression of this dehumanization, transforming human beings into instruments of their own degradation, consumed by the very power that had already consumed their lives. This resonates with the reframed, bishop-owned entertainment empires concept. While not for profit, Zhu Wen was in essence creating his own perverse entertainment or spectacle through the suffering of others. He asserted ultimate control, not just over their lives, but over their very bodies and dignity, much like the bishops controlled their empires of exploitation. His court became a stage for his sadistic performance, with the eunuchs as his unwilling, agonizing performers. In essence, Zhu Wen's mind was a terrifying nexus of sadism, paranoia, and an insatiable hunger for absolute control. The atrocity against the eunuchs was not an aberration, but a horrifying culmination of these dark psychological forces, unleashed without restraint in a world where his word was law and human life held no value against the demands of his twisted will. The horror of Zhu Wen's command did not end with the act itself. Such an unspeakable atrocity sent ripples of terror through his court and reverberated through the empire. The immediate aftermath was a chilling testament to the absolute power he wielded and the profound fear he instilled. For the eunuchs who endured this ordeal, the physical pain of the mutilation and forced consumption would have been compounded by an unimaginable psychological trauma. Even if they survived the immediate act, their lives would have been irrevocably shattered. They would have been left with not only horrific physical disfigurement, but also the indelible scars of profound degradation and humiliation. The act was designed to utterly strip them of their dignity, and its memory would have haunted them for the remainder of their days. Their very existence became a public testament to the emperor's cruelty, a living embodiment of his power to reduce human beings to mere objects of torment. The impact extended far beyond the immediate victims. A pervasive fear gripped the entire court. Every official, every general, every servant who witnessed or even heard whispers of the atrocity would have understood the terrifying implications. The silence that followed was not one of peace, but of profound terror, a chilling testament to the absolute control Zhu Wen now held over their lives. No one dared to speak out, to question, or to intervene, for they knew that any sign of dissent would invite a similar, if not worse, fate. This complicity, born of fear, further isolated the emperor in his madness, creating an environment where his darkest impulses could flourish unchecked. Documenting such an atrocity in an autocratic regime was a perilous undertaking. Chroniclers and historians of the time faced the immense challenge of recording events accurately without incurring the emperor's wrath. While specific, graphic details might have been omitted or veiled in euphemisms to ensure the chronicler's survival, the core act itself was deemed too significant, too horrifying, to be completely erased from the record. The Zhizhitongjian, as mentioned, provides a crucial, albeit terse, account indicating that the event was known and considered noteworthy even by contemporary historians. The very fact that it was recorded, despite the dangers, speaks to its profound impact and the shock it caused. Beyond the official histories, whispers and legends undoubtedly spread, perhaps exaggerated in their retelling, but rooted in the horrifying truth. The story would have become a cautionary tale, a terrifying example of imperial power gone mad. While the general populace might not have known the intricate details, the emperor's reputation for extreme cruelty would have been cemented, contributing to the pervasive atmosphere of fear that characterized his reign. It is difficult to ascertain the international perception of this specific act, given the fragmented nature of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. However, the general brutality of Zhu Wen's reign would certainly have been known to neighboring states and rival warlords, reinforcing his image as a ruthless and unpredictable tyrant. Such acts of extreme cruelty, while perhaps not always widely publicized, would have contributed to the overall perception of his regime as one to be feared and ultimately to be overthrown. Despite his terrifying displays of power, Zhu Wen's reign, like many tyrannies, ultimately ended in violence and betrayal. The very ruthlessness that brought him to power eventually consumed him. His escalating paranoia and arbitrary cruelty alienated even those closest to him, including his own sons. Unable to trust anyone, he began to turn on his most loyal generals and even his own family members, creating a climate of constant fear and resentment. In 912 CE, Zhu Wen was assassinated by his own son, Zhu Yogui, who feared being supplanted by a favored adopted son. This act of patricide, a direct consequence of the emperor's own tyrannical and unpredictable nature, brought an end to his brutal reign. The irony is stark. The man who ruled through terror, who dehumanized and destroyed others, ultimately met his end at the hands of those he had terrorized and alienated. His end, like his life, was marked by blood and betrayal, a fitting conclusion to a reign defined by unspeakable acts. Zhu Wen's reign, though relatively brief, left an indelible stain on Chinese history. While he was a pivotal figure in the transition from the Tang dynasty to the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period, his legacy is not defined by his military prowess or political acumen, but by the sheer, unadulterated horror of his cruelty. The atrocity against the eunuchs stands as a stark, horrifying monument to the depths of his depravity, ensuring his place in the darkest annals of human history. In the grand tapestry of Chinese imperial history, Zhu Wen is not remembered as a great unifier or a wise ruler. Instead, he is predominantly recalled as a tyrant of unparalleled brutality. His name is synonymous with ruthlessness, paranoia, and a chilling disregard for human life. The act of forcing eunuchs to consume their own genitals is not merely an anecdote from his reign. It is often the defining characteristic, overshadowing any military victories or administrative reforms he might have attempted. It is a story so profoundly disturbing that it has persisted through centuries of historical record, a testament to its unique horror. For the Hidden Ledger, this story is more than just a historical curiosity. It is a vital exposé. It is a truth that must be told, no matter how uncomfortable, because it reveals the absolute worst of human nature when entrusted with absolute power. It serves as a stark counterpoint to idealized notions of imperial rule, reminding us that behind the grandeur often lay unimaginable suffering. Scholarly debates surrounding Zhu Wen typically focus not on whether he was cruel, but on the extent of his cruelty and the psychological factors that drove it. Historians grapple with the challenge of interpreting such extreme acts from a modern perspective, attempting to understand the mindset of a ruler who could command such horrors. While some might question the precise details or the number of victims due to the nature of ancient record-keeping, the core act of forced degradation and consumption is widely accepted as a horrifying reality of his reign, corroborated across various historical texts. These discussions underscore the importance of critical engagement with primary sources, even when they recount events that defy belief. The story of Zhu Wen and his eunuchs is not merely a historical footnote, it is a profound assault on modern sensibilities. In an era that, ideally, champions human rights, bodily autonomy, and dignity, the act of forced mutilation and consumption is almost incomprehensible. Violation of bodily autonomy. The forced castration itself is a horrific violation, but the subsequent command to consume the severed parts represents the ultimate desecration of the human body, turning it into an instrument of its own defilement. Ultimate degradation of human dignity. This act was designed not just to kill or punish, but to utterly obliterate the victim's sense of self, their humanity, and their last shred of dignity. It was a complete reduction of a person to a mere object of the emperor's sadistic will. Sheer sadism and lack of empathy, the multi-layered cruelty, the physical pain, the psychological torment, the public humiliation, and the forced cannibalism speaks to a level of sadism that is profoundly disturbing. It showcases a complete absence of empathy, a mind utterly detached from the suffering of others. Public nature of suffering. The fact that this was likely witnessed by others, or at least known within the court, amplifies the horror. It transforms a private act of torture into a public spectacle of terror, designed to control through fear. This story serves as a chilling reminder of how far humanity has hopefully come in its understanding of basic human rights and the value of individual dignity. Yet, it also carries a crucial cautionary note. The potential for such cruelty still exists when power is unchecked, when individuals are dehumanized, and when fear silences dissent. The uncomfortable truth that the Hidden Ledger is committed to revealing is that history is not a sanitized narrative of progress and glory. It is also filled with profound darkness, with acts of unimaginable evil. By confronting these horrors, by understanding the mechanisms of cruelty and the minds that perpetrate it, we are forced to reflect on the fragility of civilization and the constant vigilance required to prevent such atrocities from ever recurring. Zhu Wen's legacy is not one to be celebrated, but one to be studied, understood, and remembered as a stark warning from the past. We have journeyed through one of the darkest chapters of human history, dissecting the life and reign of Zhu Wen, Emperor Taizu of later Liang, and the unspeakable atrocity he committed against his eunuchs. We've explored the complex world of these castrated servants, their paradoxical positions of power and profound vulnerability. We've delved into the emperor's twisted psychology, driven by sadism, paranoia, and an insatiable hunger for absolute control. And we've confronted the horrifying details of an act designed to obliterate dignity and instill absolute terror. The story of Zhu Wen forcing eunuchs to consume their own genitals is not merely a gruesome anecdote. It is a profound historical lesson. It stands as a chilling testament to the dangers of absolute, unchecked power. When a single individual holds dominion over the lives of countless others, without moral restraint or accountability, the potential for unimaginable cruelty becomes a terrifying reality. This emperor, through his actions, demonstrated the ultimate abuse of authority, where human beings were reduced to mere instruments of his sadistic will. It is also a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity. While we often like to believe in the inherent goodness of humanity, history, through figures like Zhu Wen, forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the capacity for evil exists and, when unleashed, can lead to acts that defy comprehension. The eunuchs, already victims of a societal practice that violated their bodies, became the ultimate subjects of a ruler's unhinged cruelty, their tragic fate a symbol of imperial tyranny. As we conclude this harrowing exposé, we are left to ponder the enduring echoes of tyranny. While the specific horrors of Zhu Wen's court may seem distant, the underlying dynamics of power, fear, and dehumanization remain relevant. Are there modern parallels, even if less extreme, where authority is abused, where individuals are stripped of their dignity, or where fear silences dissent? The answer, unfortunately, is often yes. This is why the Hidden Ledger exists. We are committed to bringing these uncomfortable truths to light, to ensuring that these dark chapters of history are never forgotten. Because only by confronting the horrors of our past, by understanding the mechanisms of cruelty and the minds that perpetrate it, can we hope to build a future where such atrocities are truly unthinkable. The screams of Zhu Wen's victims may be lost to time, but their story serves as an eternal warning, a chilling reminder of the fragility of human dignity in the face of absolute power. What are your thoughts on this horrifying chapter of history? How does it challenge your understanding of power and human nature? Let us know in the comments below. If you dare to delve deeper into the raw, unfiltered truths of history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the Hidden Ledger, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next chilling exposé. Prepare yourselves, for history holds many more dark secrets waiting to be unearthed.